The call came at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had just hit snooze for the second time, and my phone screen lit up on the nightstand. It was my mom. I almost didn't answer. I had a presentation at 9, and I knew if I picked up, the next 45 minutes would disappear into whatever she needed to tell me about my brother's girlfriend, or the neighbor's dog, or the price of groceries. I picked up anyway. I always did. Honey, I just wanted to let you know, your father and I booked our flights. I sat up. Flights to where? Well, your brother finally set the date. October 14th, and since the venue's in Savannah, we figured we'd go down a few days early. Make a little vacation out of it. I waited for the part where this involved me. We were hoping you could cover the deposit on our hotel. Just until your dad's pension clears next month. You know how the timing always gets weird. There it was. I was 31 years old, working 60 hours a week as a project manager at a mid-size logistics company in Columbus, Ohio, and I had been covering, just until next month, for 4 years. I said I'd think about it. I transferred the money that afternoon. I want to be clear about something, because I've read the comments on videos like this and I know what people say. They say, "Why did you keep giving? Why didn't you just say no?" And I understand the frustration. I really do. But when you grow up in a house where your worth is measured by how much you contribute, saying no doesn't feel like a boundary, it feels like a betrayal. My parents never sat me down and said, "You owe us." They didn't have to. It was just the water I swam in. My brother was the one with the charm and the big dreams, and the fiancé who wanted a $40,000 wedding in a historic Savannah mansion, and I was the one with the steady paycheck and the inability to disappoint people. My name is not important. What matters is the story, my brother. I'll call him by what he's always been to me, the favorite. Got engaged 14 months before this all happened. His fiancée came from a family that believed weddings were statements, not celebrations, statements. The engagement party alone cost $8,000. I contributed $1.500 because my mom said it would, means so much. The rehearsal dinner budget was $6,000. The wedding venue deposit was $12,000. When I asked my mom how they were planning to cover all of it, she said, "Well, we're all pitching in." Aneba. All meant me. My dad had retired early due to a back injury. My mom worked part-time at a dental office. My brother had just left his job in marketing to focus on his passion project, which was a podcast that had 47 listeners, including me and our aunt. His fiancée worked in event planning, which, as she explained to me over Christmas dinner, was why she knew how these things should be done. In the 14 months between the engagement and the accident, I sent home a total of $23,400. I'm not saying that number to be dramatic. I'm saying it because I needed to see it in writing. Finally, after everything. The Monday it happened, I had been at my desk since 7:15. I'd skipped lunch because we had a vendor call that ran over, and then I had to reformat an entire logistics report because the VP had changed his mind about the structure. By 5 o'clock, I had a headache behind my right eye that I kept ignoring. By 7, I was still at my desk. By 8:30, I was in the elevator, going down to the parking garage. And I remember thinking, I should eat something. I don't remember the drive home. What I remember next is white ceiling, white curtains, a machine beeping, the particular smell of antiseptic that I will never forget, and a nurse leaning over me saying, Hey, can you hear me? You're at Ohio Health Riverside. You're okay." I had to leave apartment building's lobby. A neighbor found me and called 911. My blood pressure had spiked to a level that, as my doctor would explain later, we typically see in patients in their 60s. I was admitted to the ICU for monitoring and stabilization. I had been unconscious for almost 11 hours. My mom got the call at 6:40 the next morning. She was at the hospital by 9:30. I know this because the nurse told me. I was still groggy, still processing where I was, and I asked if anyone had come. The nurse smiled and said yes, my mother had been there, had spoken to the doctor, and had left around 11. Left. I assumed she'd gone to find coffee or to make calls or to handle something. I drifted in and out of sleep. At 2 in the afternoon, I asked again. The nurse on the afternoon shift checked something at the desk and came back with a careful expression. Your emergency contact was notified. She was here this morning. We don't have a record of her returning. I called my mom's cell. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called my dad. Same. I called my brother. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, how are you feeling? Mom said you're stable. I'm in the ICU, and I'm alone. Where is everyone? A pause. The kind of pause that means someone is deciding how to say something they know is going to land badly. Okay. So, don't be upset. The thing is, we had the venue walkthrough today. In Savannah, the flights were non-refundable, and the venue coordinator only had this one window before she goes on maternity leave. And Mom said the doctor told her you were stable, so. I hung up. I want to be honest about what that moment felt like, because I think people expect me to say I was furious. And eventually I was. But, right then, lying in a hospital bed, with an IV in my arm and monitors on my chest, and a headache that medication had only half fixed, what I felt was something quieter. Something closer to recognition. Like a door I had always kept cracked open had finally fully closed. They were in Savannah, looking at a venue. Because the flights were non-refundable, I was stable. That's what they told themselves. Stable means not dying right now. That was apparently the bar. My coworker. She sat 2 desks down from me and had texted me the night before when I didn't show up to Standing Tuesday check-in. She came that afternoon. She brought a tote bag with a paperback novel, a bar of dark chocolate, a card signed by 6 people from the office, and a travel pillow she said I could keep. She stayed for 2 hours. She held my hand when I started crying and didn't make it weird. My coworker, not my family. The next day, a woman from HR sent flowers, a small arrangement, yellow tulips, with a card that said, "Rooting for you. Get back to us when you're ready." I stared at those flowers for a long time. 3 days passed. I got moved out of the ICU to a regular room. I still hadn't heard from my parents beyond a single text from my mom that said, "Resting up ourselves. Travel was exhausting. We'll call soon." I did not respond. On day 5, my doctor told me I could likely go home in 2 days if my numbers stayed where they were. He also told me that my stress levels, sleep deprivation, and blood pressure history formed a pattern he needed me to take seriously. He asked about my support system. I told him it was fine. He looked at my chart and then looked at me and did not say anything else about it. On day 6, my mom called. "We're back," she said. "The venue was absolutely gorgeous, by the way. Your brother and his fiancée were so happy with it. Anyway, we'll come by tomorrow morning to help with discharge." "I'm being discharged the day after, tomorrow," I said, "and I don't need help." "Don't be like that. We're your parents." "You were in Savannah. The doctor said you were stable." I know what the doctor said. I was the one in the bed. She got quiet in the way she always did when she felt she was being unfairly attacked. Then she said, "We've sacrificed a lot for you over the years. I would think you could understand that sometimes. I ended the call. They came anyway. The next morning, a day early, my dad stood in the doorway of my hospital room looking at the floor. My mom had brought a foil pan of the pasta bake I'd liked as a child, which she set on the table beside my bed, and then she looked around the room and saw the tulips from HR and the card from my coworkers, and her mouth tightened slightly. "No one from the family sent anything?" she asked. I looked at her for a moment. "You were in Savannah." "I already explained." "Mom." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I need you to stop talking for a minute." She stopped. "I have been sending money home for 4 years. I've covered deposits, flights, party venues, dress alterations, rehearsal dinner contributions, and hotel rooms. I've done it because I thought that's what family does. But I was in the ICU for 6 days, and the card on that table is from my HR department." My dad finally looked up from the floor. "I'm not going to keep doing this," I said. "Not the money, not the being last, not any of it." My mom opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "You've always been so dramatic." I asked them to leave. My dad stopped in the doorway on the way out. He turned around. He didn't say anything for a long moment, and then he said, quietly, "I'm sorry, kiddo," and walked out. That was the most my dad had said to me in years that wasn't about money. I was discharged on a Thursday morning. My coworker picked me up. She brought coffee, the good kind from the place near the office, and she didn't ask me any questions. I didn't want to answer. She helped me get settled at home and left a freezer full of meals her wife had made and a list of her schedule in case I needed anything. I slept for 14 hours. When I woke up, I had 11 texts. From my mom, 2 from my brother asking if I was still planning to contribute to the photography package, and a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it. I don't know why I didn't. Something made me press play. The voice was an older man's. Measured, careful. Like someone who had rehearsed what he wanted to say. "Hi. My name is Richard. I know this is going to sound strange, and I completely understand if you don't want to call back. I've been aware of you for a long time. I was at the hospital. I signed in at the front desk each night. I wasn't sure I had any right to be there. But I needed to know you were okay. I'm your biological father. I have documentation if you want it. I also have a lot of explanations. If you'll give me the chance, you can call me back or not. Either way, I meant what I said. I just needed to know you were okay." I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I had always known I was different from my brother. Not in the way siblings are just different. In a specific, physical way that I'd filed under genetics, are weird, and left alone. My brother had my dad's build, my dad's nose, my dad's tendency to gesture with his hands when he talked. I had none of those things. I had dark eyes, when everyone else in the family had light ones. I had a facility for numbers that neither of my parents shared. I had always just thought, people are different. "That's allowed." I called the number back. Richard answered on the first ring. We talked for 2 hours. He was 63. He had been a structural engineer before he retired. He had known my mother when they were in their late 20s, briefly, before she met my dad. He didn't know about me until I was 8 years old, when my mother's sister, my aunt, who I had always thought of as the difficult one who nobody invited to things, had told him the truth after a falling out with my mom. "By the time I knew," he said, "you were already in a family. I didn't want to blow up your life." I watched from the outside. "Your graduation when you got promoted. When your name showed up in a company press release 2 years ago. I kept track. Why didn't you ever reach out?" A long pause. I told myself I was protecting you. I think the honest answer is, I was also scared you'd say no. When I heard about the hospital, your aunt told me. I drove up. I signed in every night for 5 nights. I sat in the waiting area. I never went back to the room. I just needed to be near. I thought about those 5 nights. I had been alone in that room, thinking my family didn't care whether I lived or died, and there had been a stranger in the waiting area who drove to be near me. The visitor log, I said. Yes. My mom saw your name when she came for discharge paperwork. A brief silence. I suspected that might happen. She hasn't mentioned it to me. She won't, he said. I don't think she will. He was right. She hasn't. We met in person 3 weeks after that call, a coffee shop halfway between Columbus and where he lived outside of Cincinnati. He brought the documentation he'd mentioned, a letter from my aunt dated 15 years ago, DNA test results he'd had done from a sample. My aunt had helped him obtain without my knowledge, a photograph of himself at 29 that made me feel like I was looking at something I'd been searching for without knowing I was searching. We sat across from each other. I was searching. We sat for 4 hours. We ordered coffee, and then lunch, and then more coffee. He told me about his work, his 2 adult sons who knew about me and had, he said, more questions than I know how to answer. I told him about my job, my apartment, my coworker who had brought me a travel pillow. I told him about the $23,400. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You deserved better than that. No one in my family had ever said that to me before." I've been talking to Richard every week since then. His older son texted me last month. Carefully, politely, to say he hoped we could meet sometime when I was ready. I told him I thought I would be ready soon. I told my mom I was taking a break from contact. Not forever, I said. But for now. She cried. She said I was breaking up the family. I thought about the 6 nights I spent in a hospital bed and asked her which family she meant. I stopped the transfers. All of them. The wedding is in October and I won't be there. My brother called twice and then stopped calling. I don't know if the venue deposit cleared. I don't know if the photography package got paid. I find that I am okay with not knowing. My doctor has me on a new medication and a sleep schedule and a standing Friday morning appointment with a therapist who, in our second session, said something I've been thinking about ever since. She said, "There's a difference between being a generous person and being a person who was never given permission to stop." I've been thinking about permission a lot lately. I took a week off work in March, the first real vacation I'd taken in 3 years. I drove to Asheville, North Carolina, with no plan beyond a reservation at a small inn and a list of hiking trails. I ate breakfast at a diner at 8 in the morning and read an entire novel in one afternoon, and slept 9 hours every night. On the last morning, I sat on the inn's back porch with coffee and watched the mountains go soft in the early light. My phone was on the table. No one was calling. No one needed a deposit covered, or a flight confirmed, or a decision made on a wedding vendor. It was so quiet. I didn't know what to do with it at first, and then I did.